What's going on, everyone? Alex de Silva. I hope you are well, and I'm excited about this one. I'm very excited about this one. I don't want to do the introduction disservice, but I'm gonna try. So I've got Peter. I'm so looking forward to this one. I'm actually very excited. Peter is a peak performance strategic and athletic coach, wrestler, biohacker, sales and marketing specialist, elite competitor, and fitness model. Also, an all-around really, really incredible guy. And one person who I've been really looking forward to bringing to the podcast, not just for us to have a really good conversation, but also as well, I'm really interested and keen for you guys, the listeners, to hear his story. When I talk about mental health, when I talk about overcoming adversity, when I talk about you as an individual, how you can become anything, Peter's going to show you that. Peter, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you, Adam. That was awesome.
Good to see you, man.
Thank you.
Really excited. Really, really excited. Look, I always like to just kind of start from the beginning. You've got such an incredible history and kind of just wealth of knowledge across so many things. You've always kind of inspired me with the things that you do. But let's start from the beginning. Talk about, your childhood, growing up, actually even from the day you were born. Let's kind of go back to that story and take us through that so people can really understand who Peter really is.
Okay. That is an interesting way to start. Only because I didn't really know my story of origin initially. I had to go in and dig for it. And I did it when I was 27 years old,
Mhm.
which is you know, most people know where they came from. Most people know, how they were born. Um, these were things that I was trying to tie in because I was adopted from Costa Rica by the time I was 8, and so there were things that I grew up listening to that I believed that I had to dig and find for myself to see whether they were true. So for me, once I reconnected with my birth mother, she's in Costa Rica still,
Mhm.
and I ended up calling her and I asked her, so tell me a little bit about, my birth, what time it was. I was just curious about, specifics. And I mean, her story just blew me away. She already had 2 kids at the time, and her husband, who I was named after, he was going back and forth from Costa Rica and Nicaragua finding work. So he was in Nicaragua at this time when she was Nicaragua while she was um, in labor. So she took a horse. She was living in the mountains in the
Mhm.
country. A horse to a bus stop. The bus picked her up, took her to the capital, San Jose. Dropped her off from the bus stop. She took a taxi. Now this whole time she's carrying two babies. She's pregnant. And then she got to the hospital. She had me at the middle of the night, 1:30, sometime some around that time frame. And then the next morning, she was relieved from the hospital. So she had to take me and two other kids strapped onto her back home.
Man.
All this being in October, which is the heaviest month of rain. It's the middle of the month. I was born October 14th. And what's dangerous about Costa Rica at that time is they experienced a lot of landslides, a lot
Mhm.
of torrential storms, and so that was going on. So when she went back, took a taxi back to the bus stop back to where she dropped off the horse wasn't there, so she walked back home carrying three kids. It was the middle of the night. She said it was the middle of the night by that time.
Wow.
Yeah, and in the mountains there in Costa Rica, you can hear jaguars.
Mm.
We're all, making their sounds, trying to lure people in. I mean, so it was a dangerous time for, to be out there, three
Mm.
babies.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I feel I have that inherent will and strength
Mm.
that comes from my mother,
Yeah.
birth mother. Yeah.
I mean, we've only just started, and wow, man. I mean, this is, two things. I think, so much love and, and light to your mum. for her courage, to go off and do things like that. Latin women have a certain power. I grew up in Brazil, and my grandmother had 13 kids, and I was like the 14th. I was like the 14th child. I was born out of wedlock, didn't know my father. So when I hear stories like this, it always sends a shiver, because, you know, there are certain women who just have that unconditional love and unconditional power, where they'll go through, to any lengths, to protect us and to look after us. Go into that story, because things obviously changed, right, for mom, and circumstances weren't always easy.
So what happened shortly after that? My father, he was working as a ranch hand for many different ranchers at that time, employers, and so he was trying to make ends meet. So he started stealing calves. So he would take them from one ranch to another, sell them,
Mm.
and he got caught. And in Costa Rica, when that happens, the penalty for that is death. And so he got the electric chair.
Oh, wow.
And it was something that I believe was handled by the ranchers themselves, by the employers.
Hmm.
So it was pretty much of a sudden occurrence. And with my mother, she helped him work on the farm as well. So he found work for her as well. And
Hmm.
she couldn't do the traveling when she had four kids at this time
Yeah.
now. And so what happened was his family, he had brothers and siblings that came down, crossed the border, picked up the two eldest kids, Virginia and Paul, and raised them as their own, took them back up north to Nicaragua.
Hmm.
Um, but with me and my younger brother, we were under many more circumstances, and more people getting involved, and getting the authorities involved. We we were placed in an orphanage. So I remember, I mean, as far as I can remember, I think I was maybe 3.5, maybe 4. I
Wow.
was in an orphanage. My memory started in an orphanage.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And how long were you there for? And what was that experience for someone, being at home with mom and dad? All of a sudden things just, and I guess for us, especially being little, things seem to always happen so quickly, you know. What was that experience like for you when, you got taken away from mom, and you were in that orphanage?
Well, for me, I don't remember being taken away.
Right.
As far as I can remember, I remember growing up in an orphanage.
Hmm.
But whenever I would run away, and I had my younger brother too that I was taking care of as well,
Hmm.
and there was an innate responsibility
Hmm.
of taking care of him. He was like the only thing I had to take care of,
Hmm.
and I was responsible for. But there were times when I would run away from the orphanage, and I'd take him along with me. We just found the door that the gate was cracked, and we take that opportunity,
Hmm.
and we run to this house, and that's where our mom was.
Okay.
I just knew where she was somehow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite interesting.
And how
But
old were you then?
I was I was probably between 5 and 6 when I was doing that, when I was running away, and 7. Yeah,
Wow.
most of my seventh year was during the adoption process. So
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
lot of that stopped there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just knew where she was.
And isn't that fascinating? We always know where home truly is, right? I think there is this heart soul connection that we have, especially to our birth mothers, that it's almost like a beacon. We know exactly where to go, and how to sort of to reconnect. How was that kind of experience for you, in the orphanage? Because I know, from having listened to your story before, things kind of got a little bit dark, and sort of heavy. Would you sort of share that, experience as well, and what it was like for you at that time?
From a dark and heavy standpoint, I just knew that I was the one person that everybody needed to speak to whenever it regarded me and my brother. Whenever we would go to school. We always found ourselves being bullied. We were pretty small for Costa Ricans, for the little kids,
Mm,
and so we developed this defensive nature, or at least I taught my younger brother how to defend himself. And
mm,
many times, um, it was funny because there were a lot of kids that tried to bully me that I just flipped that narrative on their head, and I ended up turning the situations around, and they ended up becoming my good friends, and also kind of like little mafia protectors for my brother as well.
mm,
A fun scenario was during Halloween. My we didn't get a lot of gifts, but
mm,
when we did, we'd keep it for a day and then we tear it up, just
mm,
because that's how we valued things. We really didn't value them that much, but for that moment,
mm,
and we didn't want to share that value with anybody else because we just weren't good at sharing as kids. So like we'd get teddy bears. Somebody, the first person to get it would have their time with it, and then tear off a limb or an ear or whatever, and then it's like nobody wants the bear anymore. So my younger brother found a cape, and I'm not sure. I can't remember if it was a red cape. It was some that reminded him of Superman. So
mm.
it's Halloween, so he was running around like Superman, and the oldest kid saw that he was having fun with it, and so he ripped it off his neck. And so I found him crying around the corner of the house or something. I was like, dude, what's wrong? He's like, Fabian, stole my cape. And that kind of infuriated me. I was half Fabian's age.
Mm,
And I remember finding him, but I found like a stick or like some rebar or something lying around.
mm,
And his back was towards me. He was hanging out with the other kids. And I smacked him like behind the legs or something,
mm.
and it put him down to his knees, and he was crying, and I just ripped it right off his neck, and I gave it back to my younger brother. And so, from that moment on, he never picked on us. In
Mm.
fact, there was a time when he was walking Ben to school, and there was a dog that chased him, and Ben
Wow.
was the slowest, and
Mm,
it got to Ben and munched him right on the buns.
mm.
And so Fabian ended up turning around, choking the dog, and releasing him. And he was able to get Ben home safe. But when I heard about that story, I was like, good, that should have happened.
Yeah, yeah,
For you,
yeah.
you start running faster.
Yeah, so is a yeah, so two points to that story. Thanks for doing that and get quicker on your legs.
Yeah.
For
So,
sure.
but yeah, and then there was another scenario. It always happened around Halloween for some reason because I think that is something that was really for us in the orphanage. That's when we would get candy. That is
Mm,
when all the free, candy, all the toys would come to us. And so in the classrooms, we'd have this piñata, and the kids would break it open, and everybody would have a basket ready to fill. I somehow would find two baskets,
mm,
and I remember, shoving kids around, and I would get if most, not all the candy, and because I knew that Ben wasn't going to get any. He was going to get shoved around in his class.
mm.
And so whenever I left class, when I had my two little buckets of candy, he was sitting on the steps crying. His bucket was empty. And I was like, dude, what you crying about? He's like, all the kids shoved me around. I didn't get any candy. I was like, don't worry. Here you go. So
Yeah,
I always had something extra for him.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's such an amazing spirit, at such a young age as well, to have that protection for someone. And it's really interesting because I've got four children. So uh my son's going to be 25 this Sunday. My daughter turned 18, and then I've got the two little ones who's 4 and 16 months. And my daughter is hilarious. The 4-year-old, my son, he's a little monkey. He's like me. He's learned now to walk, so he's walking everywhere, and he likes to shake the TV because he gets excited. So thankfully, it's a big TV, but he likes to shake it. So every now and then, I have to go, Junior, don't do that. And I
yeah,
grabbed him by the arm the other day, and he just kind of lost his step and fell on his bum. Ruby got really protective, and she's like, Daddy, don't do that. And I was a bit confused by what she had said, and I'd realized what had happened. And I like to always communicate with my children so they understand what the scenario is. And I said to her, don't worry, baby, daddy just wants to move him to make sure that the TV doesn't fall on him. And as soon as it clicked, she's like, okay, daddy, that's cool. And it's interesting, isn't it? That unconditional love, even as we're children, doesn't matter what we have, financially, materialistically, anything like that. As long as we have a roof over our head, we know we're safe, we're warm, we've got some food and water, things that we can have. But that number one thing is that partnership, that camaraderie amongst friends, even when sometimes you have to have those punch ups to say, well, no, you're not going to be doing that to me, but we can still be friends. But then you've got that one person, that can rely on you, and you can rely on them, and you're there to protect them. In your sort of continual journey, what kind of happened with you then coming to the US?
Well, we faced some very similar situations that we did in Costa Rica, with bullies.
Mm-hmm.
I always stepped in as well, and but we became a little bit more separate only because we had different classes and the systems were a little bit different. We were also encouraged not to speak Spanish anymore because the Spanish that we spoke was a slang. So from what I remember, and whenever I relearned my Spanish, and when I went to Spain to my study abroad, I realized our Spanish had some Italian in it. It had some Portuguese in it.
Mm.
And then you're obvious we had some curse words that we were saying that we just weren't aware of that we were saying.
Yeah.
So we were encouraged. Yeah, we should probably stop speaking that Spanish because they're cussing the other kids out. That they don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So with your journey to Americas, your adopted mum came to visit Costa Rica, right? And what was that kind of journey, and for you as well, I guess, going through that process? And was your brother with you throughout that whole time as well?
He was. Yeah, if there was anybody adopting us, it was going to be the both of us, and I made that clear when I was little.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody wanted to talk to Ben, I had to be around. If anybody was going to talk to me individually, we had to have Ben join me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like I was the person that they had to go through and vet.
Right.
And they had to buy the full package, not half the package.
Yeah.
So with the woman that came down, she volunteers, and she would send some funds to the orphanage through charity and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She would come and visit, and she'd bring presents. She would sit down with all the kids, and we were just drawn to her. God uses people for many things. So he used her for our adoption. One of the things that happened with her was she would come down and she would she'd take us on these little excursions over the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And she handpicked us specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started to grow a relationship with her, and she became, eventually she became our mother, our adopted mother.
Wow. Yeah. And when did you make that transition into to the US?
So because of the systems there, they had adoptions were closed in Costa Rica for about 5 years roughly. So it was hard to get anybody adopted out of Costa Rica at that time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big scare about, people harvesting organs and stuff like that. So that was a big issue.
Mm.
They would take kids, and kids would go missing, and then voila, here's some harvested organs. So yeah, it was some pretty creepy stuff. But it took about 11 months for that whole the adoption to realize. And then we came to the United States. I was 7 years old in 1999, October 8th. It was my adopted sister's birthday, so she got us for her birthday.
Oh, wow.
Came to the United States, 1999.
And how was that? Because and I'd love to always hear people's stories, because like you, I grew up in Brazil, and when I came to the UK, it was a very different experience for me, because for me, I had
Mhm.
so much freedom. I had
Yeah.
so much freedom when I was in Brazil, over there, and I'm not sure what it was like in Costa Rica, but you either go to school in the morning or the afternoon, and I always tried to go in the morning, so then I had the rest of the afternoon, and my friends did the same, and we'd go out into the streets and go on our BMXs or skateboards, whatever it is, and just go be kids, right? But
Right.
coming to the UK, it's a very different story because you go to school at 8:30 and you don't leave until 3 yeah, about 3:30, I think it is. And then you've got after school clubs, so on and so forth. And also as well, the other thing which really freaked me out is when you get to about 11, 12, and you start to go to secondary school, you have to wear a uniform. So you're with blazer, shirt, tie. It was completely different, for me. So that kind of threw me. What was your experience? Because I know the US, you don't have to kind of wear the blazer and tie. They're not as strict. But
Yeah.
culturally, was that a shock, or did you just absolutely love the experience?
And definite culture shock. In fact, whenever I first stepped on U.S. soil, right after we got off the plane, I said hello to the security officer. I was very like an open kid, and uh, it's interesting because when I speak in Spanish, I'm very extroverted. When I speak in English, I'm almost introverted. So it's really weird. But I said hello to the security officer, who was in the security lines, and he didn't say anything back to me. I was like, okay, all righty.
Yeah.
And I was like, it is because I said hello to him in Spanish, and to him he was probably like, who's this kid? Like he's in the U.S. He needs to speak English.
Mm,
So I think that was my initial response, was to kind of just, okay, we're gonna become a wallflower. We're gonna just observe, see how people operate, you
mm,
know, with each other. And yeah, the same thing happened too, because with school, we would go in the morning, Costa Rica. We'd be let out in the afternoon, all the afternoon, just to do whatever we wanted, basically.
mm,
And then the U.S., it was school until 3.
mm,
And we were waking up at 6 a.m. just to hit the bus
mm,
and get on the bus. And so that was a big change. We weren't used to waking up that early.
mm.
Um, and then with regards to uniforms, we didn't necessarily have to do the uniforms until we went to a private school.
Okay.
Yeah, and those were mandatory.
Mhm.
But yeah, they're very similar experiences that you and I share on that front.
Yeah. And what was it like for you? Because you talked about some of the bullying and I think stresses that we all go through. What was that like here as well? And did you speak English when you came to the US, or were you pretty much like me, fresh off the boat and you couldn't speak a word?
Yep, just fresh off the boat, couldn't speak a word. I understood majority of it.
Hmm.
Speaking of it was the issue. In fact, we took 6 years of homeschooling just to learn English.
Okay.
So we started in a bilingual elementary school,
Hmm.
and then that's where the teachers suggested that we stop the Spanish, just focus on English, and then that's when we went and became homeschoolers
Hmm.
for 6 years.
And what was that like? The sort of the homeschooling and
I mean, it was quite an experience. It allowed me to really kind of grow at my own pace. Math became something that just came so easy to me.
mm,
Um, by the time we were done with homeschooling, we had just tested into a private school, the top private school in Texas, and I was going in with senior level math as a freshman. So I still had 4 years to go. So I was able to take some college credit.
mhm,
In fact, my senior year, I didn't even take math because
mm,
I took as much as I could.
mm,
It's out there. So and then that's also where we started our athletics, because with homeschooling, you didn't really have um, ways to compete
mhm,
unless you were part of a club
mhm,
or part of a school.
mhm,
And so we found, the communities that were homeschooled, and we would connect in that way. In fact, I guess the very first sport was swimming, um, and it was through YMCA.
Hmm.
but we basically just did that for fun.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't, too much competition on that front.
Mm. Did you always have that competitive edge and that kind of drive, or was it something which you sort of found when you started to kind of do the swimming and fell into the wrestling?
A little bit, yes. I think that competitiveness really came through just growing up in the house with my brother, and we ended up having our older siblings. They were adopted as well, about a
Okay.
year and a half later.
Hmm.
Um, and so my oldest brother became or added to that competition. We were very good at video games,
Hmm.
multiplayer games. I would win the majority of them, but they would level up too, and so it was just a way, for we just build that competition from the home.
Hmm.
And whenever we started in high school, that's when we were ready to basically let it out.
Hmm.
We just didn't know what sports we were going to be good in. We knew we were good runners,
Hmm.
uh, but we really didn't have much to base that off of other than Boy Scouts, because we did Boy Scouts for a little bit as well.
Yeah, yeah. God, that's interesting. I did the Boy Scouts as well when I was little. I was a Cub first, then did the Boy Scouts. But I got kicked out because I was cheating.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was being a bit cheeky and yeah.
Cheeky.
And you have to learn, right? You've got to live and learn these things.
Right.
And then eventually I came to the UK anyway, so things changed. But um I love I'm a huge fan of UFC, MMA. I've been, in martial arts, even if it's kind of learning on my own from the days of Bruce Lee, Van Damme, like all of those kind of big action films, to then eventually going into it myself. So I learn a lot around the wrestling part, through watching UFC, especially kind of like the big American competitors. Um, how did you come about, wrestling, and what was that like for you? Was it like an immediate, right, I found my home, or did you get your ass kicked a few times and went, what am I doing here?
That's an interesting question because I learned about wrestling initially when I started at the private school. Once we were done with homeschooling, we tested in um, that the summer in between, they typically had like an athletic program where all the kids would come in and just it it would just be a program just to keep kids on their toes throughout the year.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where we initially were able to base where we were competitively on a running standpoint, stamina standpoint, uh, with other kids our age. And we found that we were very fast. And so here in Texas, football is huge. So
Mm,
huge. Football takes like most of the the eyes, I guess, the attention.
mm.
And but the coach, the offensive coach for the football team, looked at me and my brother. He's like, "You guys would be some really good wrestlers." This guy's he wrestled up in uh, Wisconsin, and he was a state champion.
Wow. Okay.
And so he had a background in wrestling, and I guess he just saw the drive that
Mhm.
we had, and he knew a little bit more about what was going on because he was part of the athletic program, and he knew there was going to be a wrestling program that was going to start that year. We
Mhm.
didn't know. We heard about wrestling. We knew it was like, oh well, you can compete at your weight class. So at that time, I was skin and bones. I was like 5'8". I weighed 120 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So um, for me, football wasn't a good strategy. I mean,
Yeah.
if he landed on a kid just the wrong way, like somebody lands on an ankle,
Mm,
that's it's over.
mm,
So I was like, let me just let's do cross country first, see how that goes,
mhm,
and then we'll see what comes in winter. And so when cross country was going on, it's also football season. So I was able to
mhm,
run. I made varsity, um, which was awesome. I
mhm.
was like, wow, that's pretty easy. And so it wasn't easy at all. It was just a small school. So whenever I ran against other schools, I was like, okay, well, I need to start picking up, my game here a little bit.
Yeah. And
But
just
as
for
yeah,
just for the UK listeners, what is varsity?
So you have different, like it's like starters versus B players versus C players.
Right.
Are you a starter, or are you one of the get, or are you a backup?
Hmm.
So like for football or soccer, in
Hmm.
your case, it's
Hmm.
who starts and who plays most of the games, and
Hmm.
who's the relievers, and then who are all the other fillers and practice
Cool.
partners. And you actually get that in wrestling as well, because
Hmm.
there's only one guy who wrestles per for the school per weight class. Um, so that's where the similarity is with
Hmm.
soccer up there in the UK.
Yeah.
But football season is the same time as cross country. So whenever we were watching the football games, I would go and support and just kind of to watch. I really wasn't much of a uh, I didn't really enjoy watching it much, so I would kind of hang around, the other kids and stuff. And one of them was getting bullied, and I stepped up to his bully, and this kid was also in my grade. He was one of the popular kids too,
Hmm.
and he was just trying to instigate more, and I was like, oh well, I'm right here, let's get it going. And this is a private school, I could easily get kicked out. I just got here. And I'm about to tear this kid up. And so he goes and gets another kid, and it's a smaller kid, but this he carried himself a little bit differently.
Mm.
And apparently the year before they had a wrestling club. He was the star of the wrestling club. And so I was like, okay, well, he talked his smack, I talked my smack, and I learned later that he was the wrestler. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to join the wrestling team. I'm going to show this kid up. And so whenever wrestling season came around, we jumped in, and he was my training partner. I
Wow, there you
got
go.
beat up probably the first week
Hmm.
before it started to get even. And from then on, I just enjoyed the sport. I didn't even go in to beat him up anymore. I just went in to learn.
Yeah.
So that just became, my new passion,
Mm.
and it stuck. And um, we went to state. It was the first year for the program, so we didn't know how to officially weigh in, how to do any of this, other minutia that the administration had to do to make sure that the wrestlers were doing things safely.
Hmm.
So whenever I wrestled at state, which is the ultimate competition,
Hmm.
they bumped me up a weight class. And I was like, well, I'm here, so I might as well wrestle.
Mm.
And I ended up taking third. The guy who won it ended up being a national champ. But I learned so much from him. I couldn't do anything
Wow.
against him. And that's who I strive to be more like. I was like, I want to be the wrestler that just basically knows all the positions, all the situations, and just can put his opponent in so many positions just to score, and then it's over.
Mm.
And yeah, and
Yeah.
then for the next 3 years, I was finding camps, programs that I could, level up the craft.
Mm. And you just then immerse yourself in that and take me on that journey where it's kind of taken you, because I almost want to say the O word, but I don't really want to spoil it. I want to find the journey first and then sort of lead into sort of current times of what that could potentially be looking like for you for next year. It's next
Yeah,
year, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
Um, that first program that we found just was a state north of us in Oklahoma, and it was an intensive training camp, wrestling camp, um, in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It was led by the head coach there. He's a six-time world champ, two-time gold medalist. He did it consecutive years, 6 years in a row. And I went up there, and and in fact, my training partner went up there with me, and we learned a lot. It just I I don't know. My younger brother didn't like it as much at the time, or I guess he wasn't ready
mhm,
yet, to immerse himself that much. So I was the only one in the family who went. And it's a 10-day program, and on the 10th day, you finish with a 12-mile run. Yeah, so it's
that's
like
tasty.
that's a 20K. Yeah, that's a 20K.
Yeah.
I was the second one done. Every year, I was always second or third. There was always one kid who was faster than I was, and um, but uh, but yeah, I learned, and that exposed me to even more.
Mm,
uh, kids who were coming in from different states, and I learned that Texas wasn't one of the high-ranking states in wrestling at all. We were
mhm,
great in football, but
mhm.
when you got to wrestle and partner with kids from Pennsylvania, you learned a couple things or two, from those kids. And I did that every summer until I graduated high school.
Mhm. And what does it take? Because you mentioned there a number of times about taking second, taking second. There was always that one person there.
Yep.
And a lot of people, even just in their day to day, people are like, yeah, I'm comfortable, I'm good, I'm happy. And mediocrity, has become the best thing ever. And but I've kind of learned, and you've shown through the hard times, sort of growing up and everything that had happened, that there is a next stage. There is the next stage. What does it take? What did it take you to go from? Because I'm sure for you, and just you talking, I getting frustrated because I know what it feels like, especially when you're competitive and you want to do more, you want to do better. That there is that thing, in the mind, in the body, where you're just like, I'm not going to give up. What did it take you to go from that second to then being the winner?
Um, Grit, there's a sense of never quitting. There's always another peak that must be climbed, and the good thing about being second and third is that it's not that far away.
Mm,
So it's almost motivating.
mm,
Um, whenever I graduated, I actually went to OK State my
mhm,
first year, and I was there on academic scholarship. I ended up applying late, but most of the kids that went in there and applied for athletic scholarships for
mhm.
wrestling, these kids were nationally ranked, all Americans. All Americans means you make the top eight at the big national tournaments.
Wow.
I never made it to the top eight. I was ranked top eight, but and that was in the private school sector.
Mhm,
So I went up there and I walked on. Um, and as I trained with that group, I was in the bottom of the totem pole. This was the farthest from the top I had ever been. And so
mhm,
that was, I was almost, I wouldn't say I was discouraged, but I knew where I was at in the midst of, all the other athletes. So I was like, okay, I'm a little further back. This is a day to day, effort. We're going to grow 1% every day, 1% better. Luckily for me, I had guys who were training for the London Olympics near
mhm,
my weight class. 133 or 60 kilograms was Coleman Scott. He ended up taking bronze that year.
mhm,
And then my training partner specifically, who I would train with after all practices, and they were much longer than they are now.
mhm.
Um, he took fourth at Worlds the year before, and he weighed
Wow.
like 10 pounds lighter than I did. But
Mhm,
he would just throw me around like a rag doll. And I was like, how is he doing this? And so
mhm,
as I developed in that one year, I felt like that one year I learned more than I did in all 4 years of the prior in high school
mhm,
prior. And so my identity started to change,
mhm,
and school wasn't as important to me at that time. So I was faced with a dilemma at that time too, because I went to school for academics. So my
mhm,
parents, they basically told me, you have one or two choices. You stay here, you figure out how to pay for your education and you wrestle, or you come home and we pay for education, and that's that.
mhm.
And they gave me basically like an hour to make this decision. And so this is about the time when I'm ending my second semester, and um, I don't even know if I'm going to stick around there just to
Mhm,
train. But that's when the season started for the international styles, freestyle and
mhm,
Greco.
mhm,
And so my hopes were to stick around and stay there and then
mhm.
further develop. I didn't go that route. I decided to pursue other people's dreams. And so
Uh-huh.
I took the next 7 years to get them off my back, finish school. I ended up finishing with 2 degrees, one in Spanish, one in biomedical engineering, and then two minors, one in mathematics and the other in mechanical and energy engineering. So
Mhm,
there were many things that I did just to make sure I I had a safety net basically.
Yeah.
But when I look back and I encourage other people just to become the best version of themselves. You go
Mhm.
all in on not plan B, plan
Mm.
A,
Mm.
because then you don't lose this time.
Mm.
So once I graduated in 2018, I looked for a job. I got into sales. I was done with engineering, um, at least for then and now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to develop different skill sets, communication specifically,
Mhm.
and sales was one of the things that was going to do that for me. And so I went through the different sales programs, selling in different verticals, new home construction, physician recruitment, logistics,
Mhm.
and I faced a lot of success in every single one of them.
Mhm.
Um, Different circumstances kind of allowed me to kind of change through.
Mhm.
But then COVID hit, and that one was the one that kind of put me back on track with wrestling.
Mhm.
I started listening to Audible books. One of my main ones when I would go around was David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah.
And I followed a lot of his instruction. He's like, don't listen to music while you work out because you won't have it there when you need it,
Mm.
when you need to perform. So I would start running these 15-mile runs, um, and start getting back into shape. And I did this within a 2-week period. I did 4 15-mile runs, and I went to a point where I just couldn't run anymore because I had the same or similar stress fractures in my
Mm.
ankles from running so much, from not training at all to all of a sudden, running
Yeah.
these half marathons. Um, but while I was out there, I was praying and I was listening, and I found that person that I lost. I guess that that hungry
Mhm.
that hungry wolf
Mm.
that was there for just biding his time, just waiting to come out.
Mm.
And I started wrestling. We had the last chance qualifiers. It came through in Texas. Texas was the only state that had any open competition because of COVID. All the other states were shut down.
Mhm.
So team trials came down to Texas, and I had a three days notice to cut 15 pounds and jump in. And I wrestled Greco, which is a style like I thought I
Mhm.
had an advantage in. Not so much. There's not a lot of experience that I had in Greco other than in high school, and that's when I shut it down. But
Mhm.
10 years coming in and wrestling these kids who were at that level was
Mm.
different. But I realized that I was just as strong as them, just as fast as they were. I just wasn't there technical,
Mhm.
right? So I was like, okay, so there's a lot of groundwork that I need to make up here.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started locating and calling coaches, and seeing who was available in my area to train with. And yeah, it started, one boulder after another. I started moving them and clearing the path, and this last summer I ended up calling John Smith again.
Mhm.
He recognized my name. He didn't know my face, so and it was hard to get him on the phone because he has so many kids that are trying to get into that program.
Mm.
And so he was doing a lot of the recruitment aspect of the coaching job. And so I ended up finally getting his number. He sent me his cell phone number, and I texted him one day, said, "Hey, I'm driving up. I'll be there at 1." and, and I caught him in the meeting. He was just leaving. He was about to go to lunch. Caught him for like 30 minutes. It took me four hours to drive up there. I spoke to him for 30 minutes, and then I drove back. But in that conversation, I told him, here are my goals. I have 2 years to get in the best shape that I can to compete at the Olympics.
Mm.
And I mean, I am capped where I'm at. I can't find the room that's going to provide me the environment to grow. And I know this is the one that's going to do it for me. And so he just basically looked at me and said, well, if you're serious, then get on up here. And but don't come for another 2 months because there's no wrestling going on. It was the middle of the summer. It was kind of their
Mm.
break season. So that's when my wife and I ended up packing our things from Texas and driving up, and getting here for the first day of practice. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah,
I've grown since a lot. I
I
mean,
can
it's crazy.
imagine. Because just for context, when did you stop wrestling? What age?
I was 20.
And when did you start wrestling again?
I was 30, and like in by a week I was 31.
Right.
Yeah.
So in
Well,
11, yeah.
when I wrestled at OK State and I left, and then I
Mhm.
came back to OK State, it was almost an 11th day, an
Yeah.
11-year period.
11-year period. Man, and that goes to show, doesn't it? When the passion's there, and you cannot put that fire out, you
Right.
know. And when you sort of ignited that fire, you talked about there just kind of that resilience, just not giving up, driving all the way up there just to go and have this meeting, just to be there face to face, because you know what the challenges are. There's going to be so many other kids, younger kids as well, who will have that kind of age, so to speak, age advantage. And but you just never give up. What was that kind of internal conversation, that internal dialogue for you? Because there is obviously a vision there. There's a longer term vision, and bring that to light. And what does that kind of look like on a day-to-day basis, through the good days, the struggles, and but what keeps you going?
There was always a voice in my head when I was young, and you know, it it's a higher power, however you want to interpret it.
Mhm.
For me, it's my Lord, and so I've always known that presence was there, even when I was a kid in the orphanage. Um, it was that word and that voice that was always a step ahead, always pushing me to be better. It was the one that convicted me whenever I realized I did something wrong. So whenever I went out to run again and listen to David Goggins before my runs, just go out there and pray. That became almost blatantly obvious. It's like you need to get back into wrestling.
Mm.
This is the path that was laid out for you. This is where you're going to glorify the Lord. And this is also going to create more opportunities along the way for other things. But it also kept me. It's a path that keeps me humble because there's always somebody out there that's better. And just like being third or second constantly, you see
Mhm.
you see who's ahead, but they're better only because of circumstance, small circumstance, and that's something that you can't really control.
Mhm.
But because you're because I'm now in a place where I can grow a little bit more, and I have access to the equipment, to the training rooms, to the partners that are highly skilled.
Mhm.
Now I have a little bit more of that control of where I'm going to finish. And the vision really began in those runs
Mhm.
when I was out there, when I was digging deep. I was finding the Goggins within, the
Mhm.
hammer
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and through that, it's allowed me to slow down and really see where I need to grow in other areas, business, as a husband, um, on social media, promoting motivational, inspirational videos for people. Diet is another diet and nutrition is another area that's become huge,
Mm.
and it allowed me to focus more on the technique rather than going in and focusing on will I make weight at this next tournament.
Mm.
Because diet really promotes a lot of our performance.
Really does.
And most people, they don't even look at the importance of it. And
I
so there's so many different prong approaches that you can take just from diet alone that's going to help you, develop faster than everybody else.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's, and I wanted to kind of dial into that a little bit, just to understand the process that it takes, because connecting with that, with the creator, being able to channel that energy, to connect with it, and to feel, to feel that presence, in everyday life. That's one thing, right? But we have to take the daily action. you know the creator will always guide us. He'll always give us that, that yes, no, keep going. There is a reason why you're being challenged. There's a reason why these things are happening. It's all part of your growth. It's all part of your message. As you talked about wanting to inspire others. But let's kind of channel into, or just kind of dial into the nutrition part, the things that you're doing now to get you to, because you also being a sort of a peak performance coach. That's something that's so important, isn't it? And it's something that I always look at and I'm so passionate and fascinated by, because we are a mind, body, spirit complex, and in prayer, in meditation, in breath work, we connect in mind, body, spirit, and we allow ourselves to really kind of go within. But on a day-to-day here as the experience, which is us as a man, as a woman, having this human experience, there are actions we need to take. If we want to go into our goals, we've got to make sure we've got that clear mind. We've got to make sure that the mindset is channeled, is taught in a certain way to allow us, even in the toughest time, to just accept and understand that it's okay, not to kind of get taken by and think, oh, I'm crumbling. It's not about the crumble. It's about just going, okay, well, this is an experience. God, show me what this means. Where do I learn from this? So talk to me about how you fine-tune the mind. How do you then tune the body with the nutrition? Because that is something which is taken me years to learn. I'm going to be 43 this year, and I had to fine-tune my nutrition. I've been a vegan, I've been veggie, I've eaten crap, I've struggled with my weight. I have a thankfully not today. For years I suffered from addiction, and with food, alcohol, sex, drugs. I tried to kill myself. And so because of all of these things, I learned the importance, how incredible we are as individuals. And talk on that a little bit, especially with what you're doing and where you're going, the importance of really having that powerful mindset, but the nutrition piece, which I really want to hear and learn from you as well.
Right. You mentioned that the almost taking your life or attempting to take your life. That was something that I also faced when I was young. In fact, I was in an orphanage when I did that. So we're over that episode, but we walked away with a sense of self-worth that's undeniable now. And so that's part of the mindset. When you start with your self-worth, am I important enough that I'm gonna feed myself correctly? Whether it's reading the right material, allowing the right stuff to go in through your eyes, eating the right foods, getting the right people in your life to speak into your life. All of that fills into the mindset. And it kind of, you can look at life, as being like a raft being swayed around, having no sail, or you can add a sail to it. Right. And the sail is what you have a direct, how do I want to say this? You have the ability to build it or allow it to set in for you. I guess I'm talking mostly on the boundary side. Like there's certain things that you can let in, certain things that you don't want to let in. So you have the ability and control to let those good things into your life. And that's going to allow you to build a sail, to travel wherever you want, and navigate the world wherever you need. Yeah. So with regards to the diet aspect, so diet for me was very interesting because whenever I was going through the sales and not working out in corporate and not working out often, I was starting to gain, I wouldn't say I was trying to gain too much weight, but I was starting to get soft. And I didn't like getting soft. There's just something about it. I'm like, nah, I can't do this.
I get you.
So I started tampering into different diets. Keto was one of them. vegan's another one that's really worked for me.
Hmm.
Keto was the one where I definitely went in kind of off. I don't want to say off the deep end because it's meant for, it has its benefits,
Hmm.
right? But from a performance standpoint, for me, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. So the vegan keto is what I typically work on. And the reason I do that is because you want to be able to fuel your body, not just for performance, but also for mental clarity
Hmm.
and that mental performance as well. Focus. Everything that we digest, and all the things that we need mentally is all processed in the gut.
Hmm.
And so your serotonin, your dopamine, all those neurotransmitters, that's produced in the gut and they're
Hmm.
transferred up to the brain. And that's, they're released, throughout the body and
Hmm.
whatnot. But then you also get the molecules that produce your testosterone or
Hmm.
your, what's the woman's called? I can't remember. Any, anyways, so you got your testosterones, your different types of hormones,
Hmm.
your regulators, and everything like that. So once I started to really dive into the vegan diet, I started to understand, okay, so what are the things that are really going to help me push to get the keep me focused, allow me to access peak performance and build stamina. And so those were some of the things that I looked into. I'm huge into cruciferous green vegetables. They've allowed me to 10x my testosterone production. It's an enhancer. I don't have to
Hmm.
take TRT or anything like that. It's all natural. Comes from
Yeah.
whole foods.
Hmm.
Uh, that, in fact, is great into a great look into ATP production. So
Hmm.
when plants go in through photosynthesis,
Hmm.
they're creating ATP, which is the food and energy source for them to grow and to produce oxygen. And so we can actually do that in our own bodies. And one of the biohacks that I've also gotten into is um, red light therapy, photo red light therapy.
I've seen you post. Yeah, I've seen you post around that.
Yeah, and so just recently there was coach who was interviewed. Um, I watched the interview. He's the head nutritionist for one of the programs that's been destroying the wrestling scene for the last 12 years. I think they won 10 out of the last 12 years
Wow.
as a team, and it's a very new team as well
Hmm.
with new coaching. But he looked into it. He was also into combat sports, and he transitioned to Ironman and running and swimming and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And so he started to develop a system for diet and biohacking that promotes the ATP growth for these combat athletes. And all the athletes that are on the program, they recently won the world championship for the US, all of them.
Wow.
And they were all medalists. It was crazy. And so I started looking into it. And I was like, I'm actually doing this stuff, but I didn't realize there was a deeper level
Hmm.
into it. So the more research I dived into, the more I realized, oh, I see how he's accessing ATP production. That helps our mitochondria
Hmm.
produce more testosterone, produce more ATP,
Hmm.
um, helps uh, shorten our recovery cycles,
Hmm.
boost our stamina. I got the training mask um,
Hmm.
that helps with. Initially, I got in there because I wanted to increase stamina,
Hmm.
and it does that very well because it allows me to pull air. It forces me to pull air
Yeah.
deep into
Hmm.
the gut while
Hmm.
I'm competing.
Hmm.
When I noticed, wrestlers really they were neck and neck and they were going into overtime. They were breathing with their guts. If you go
Hmm.
to the gym, and you see the guys lifting, they're breathing with their chest. They're trying to make themselves look big.
Hmm.
But when you're in a combat scenario, you're not going to be breathing with your chest too
Hmm.
much. You're going to be taking as much as much
Yeah.
oxygen as you can win. So I started noticing the difference, and I was like, okay, well, this obviously has a benefit to it. I'm going to start using it. It's
Hmm.
increased my stamina like tenfold. But
Hmm.
then I did more research on it, and it enhances your human growth hormone.
Hmm.
Is basically a natural PED that your body produces on its own. You
Yeah.
don't have to look for, these supplements. to do it. Your body generates it all. Your hypothalamus is like your pharmacy.
Yeah.
You just have to know how to access the pharmacy.
Yeah. And it's very powerful. You're talking about breathing there and using a mask, because I got into breath work, which is something where that whilst I was doing MMA and I did CrossFit, I knew actually when I was kind of finishing off CrossFit, I started to learn about breath work. And honestly, it changed my life. And it's probably been maybe about 3-4 years now that I've been doing it daily.
Yeah.
And I've used it on a daily basis. I teach now, and I do it in a ceremonial perspective as well, with so breathwork therapy and healing. And honestly, Peter, I cannot stress it enough, especially from a competitive and sports perspective, doing a breathwork, as you mentioned about breathing into the belly. There are certain types of breath that you can use that not only helps to expand the belly, but also then to expand the chest, and it actually helps to grow and fortify the lungs. So you actually breathe. I know it kind of doesn't make too much sense, but because you've expanded the lungs so much, and I found this myself, actually, I sometimes can breathe less. I don't need to breathe as, and I consciously breathe, obviously, because sometimes people shallow breathe, but I don't mean in a sense of that. It's because I've taught my body now to, as you do with the mask, you pull so much air in, you force the body to pull so much oxygen in that, you're allowing your strength. You're basically, it's like doing bicep curls for the lungs, right? And it's the same thing. And I've noticed this, I put it to the test, where I literally just keep my mouth shut. I'll push myself towards the end of a workout, and I'm gasping, I'm blowing out my ass. And but what I do is I close my mouth, and I do not breathe through the nose. If my nose is blocked, I'm either going to breathe through it or I'm going to pass out. But I've learned to do that, which is the same kind of effect as maybe what that mask does, but it's just channeling that breath through the belly and just allowing the body to also then relax at the same time, which has helped me to recover quicker. When I'm actually working out now, I consciously try to breathe through the nose. And you talked about, when you're wrestling, because you're so close to someone, and and because you're moving from so many different directions. It was the same in kind of MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you're probably a little bit more closer when you're grappling. I found it as well. And I always like to train with the heavier guys. I'm probably about 85 kilos now, I think, which is probably about 185, I think. Yeah, about 185. And I like to train with the heavier guys, the 90, 100 kilo guys, just to kind of, to help me. So having a 100 kilo guy on top of you, as you probably know from wrestling, is not fun. But allowing myself to breathe through the nose through that, at the same time, one of the biggest things that I learned, and I'd love you to kind of speak on this, is to learn to stay relaxed. And this is that mastery of the mind, body, spirit. Even in that tough times when you're challenging, and this is where I want to hear your review. When you're competing, do you kind of use the same formulas? Like, how does that kind of work for you?
So going back to when I was competing at my very first state championship, and I had to face the wrestler who became the national champ. I realized there was a different pace that he was operating in, and it was calm. It wasn't frantic. He wasn't rigid. He was calm, collected, and almost fluid-like. Whenever he needed to tense up, he would tense up, especially if I would try and go in on a shot. He'd make himself a break wall. But that was the only instance where he was rigid, right? So as I further developed in wrestling, I started to calm down. I started to breathe in through the nose more often. All my opponents were always breathing through the mouth, and I would always tell them, like even in wrestling practice, even now, kids who are wrestling up there now that I train with, they'll be breathing with their mouth. I'm like, breathe in through your nose. You get 20% more oxygen if you just breathe in with your nose. And these guys are calm, right? They're wrestling and they're calm. They're in flow, but they could just access a little bit more. It could level up everybody's game in that room, right? And so that's that's what I try and teach. Whenever I was coaching kids in high school,
Hmm.
that's what I would teach them. And but before I would mention any of that, I would wrestle them first,
Hmm.
and and just to kind of gauge where they were at, but then also ask questions after we were done with our little sparring session and
Hmm.
see what they learned from me. And almost every single time, everybody was like, "You were so calm. Why are you so calm?"
Yeah.
So I was like, "It's because I'm breathing through my nose.
Mm.
I don't have to stress."
Mm.
Like, when you guys get to a point, right now you're still fairly new to the sport, so I understand the rigidness and the frantic and the anxious movements and everything. But if you just slow everything down and just breathe, breathe through your nose, out through your mouth, and through your nose, deep breaths in through your nose. That's it.
Mm.
It'll change your whole performance.
Mm.
It'll slow everything down. Everybody else is traveling at high speed. They have trouble slowing down. If
Mm.
they see you shooting in with a slow shot, they're still going all frantic,
Mm.
right? They'll open themselves up to more opportunities for you to score. So
Mm.
you just keep calm, collected, and you just develop from there. And
Slows
so yeah,
everything down.
that is so when you were explaining that, I was like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any practices around breathing, breath work? Is there something that's kind of part of your routine, or even, meditation, kind of quietening the mind?
I do cold plunges.
Oh, I love those.
I
I used to hate them.
did too. I used to hate the cold weather.
Yeah.
This is actually I hated the cold weather even when I was at OK State my first year back in 2011.
Hmm.
And whenever I came back home, um, from school, I went to the University of North Texas, and we had a major freeze. It froze all of Texas for about 2 weeks,
Mm.
just iced over. The roads were iced over. Nobody could get to the university. The university was closed. It was during finals week, and I remember, um, I never liked the cold, and I had to take the trash out that day, and the trash was just right out the garage door, but we have the side door that we just walk and throw it in, and there was ice on the ground, and it was sunny, and I was shirtless in my pajamas, but I did not have socks on. And I was like, oh, great. I have to walk 10 feet to get to that trash bin. It was like a 20 feet or a 10-yard distance. And as I was sitting there, I was like, it actually feels nice out here.
Mm.
And the area that I was standing in, just right out the door, it has a little bit of an awning. So there was no ice or anything there. So the heat from the sun was actually warming that spot.
Mm.
So I was standing in the warm spot, just kind of just enjoying the cold for the first time.
Mm.
I was like, okay, well, I need to take this trash. Let me just walk on the ice real quick. I started stepping on the ice. I was like, oh, that's cold, that's cold, that's cold. I run over to the and put the trash into the bin. And as I'm walking back and I step back on the warmth, I was like, that wasn't too bad.
Mm.
And so I was like, let me just try just sitting here, standing on the ice, see how long I can stand for. And so it was just something that it just random, just stopped my whatever I was doing. Just, I
Mm.
was being present, and I just stood there. And what I realized was I can actually enjoy the cold when there's sun. And even now, in retrospect, that's infrared,
Hmm. Yeah.
red light. That's igniting and supercharging the mitochondria.
Mm.
But even and I'm able to kind of just get past that and just stand in that on that ice block basically, no problem. And so even in that moment, I started breathing slowly. And it's funny because like I didn't even think about that till now. All
Mm.
three practices are in that one moment.
Mm.
I'm in retrospect, I'm just now putting it all the pieces together.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
so
Yeah, it's powerful, right? Because a lot of the things
oh,
that we practice as well, we get that beautiful rays from the sun. That's why they talk about, make sure you get that sunshine, do that cold plunge, like
right.
these things. He talks about kind of that mind. Again, he brings us back, doesn't it, to the mind, body, spirit, because you touched on earlier about how we are our own pharmacy, effectively. And we are through the breath, we are through the mind. Change the mindset, you change the narrative. The breath helps us to not only stay alive, but it also helps us to heal, to expand the lungs, to perform better, in kind of day-to-day life. But you've shown there, even from a higher level performance, and in nutrition, which for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at what, 70-80%, when you're looking at, if you dial in that nutrition on a daily basis, is 70% of the work that you do. And I remember looking at that, I thought it was the other way around. It's like, I need to train more and then not worry too much about my nutrition. And I was, I was like, still soft, and then I changed that around and found something that sort of worked for me. And now it's, things changed completely, and it's powerful what you said there about, just kind of being in the sun, being out in nature, so you kind of got the breath, you've got the sun, you've got the ice, and all of these things all in one place, right? Which is, is so important for what we do. Talk to me about the goal for you, the next few things now, because you've obviously got this huge passion for wrestling. You're now at this, you've kind of found your home, am I right in saying that? You sort of found your home again. And what's that end goal for you? What's the must have? Like, there's no negotiation here, I've got to do this.
The must have is gold in Paris, the Olympics next year, 2024. So there are many things that I have to knock out along the way. So there are the many goals or the many peaks that are within reach.
Mm-hmm.
We have U.S. Open that's coming up. It's in
Mm-hmm.
Las Vegas. So I make the top 7. I get into the team trials. I have to win it to make the American spot, win Worlds. I have a team trials for Costa Rica. It's the only tournament that they have this year. They don't have any other tournaments in between.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily that comes after our team trials. So once I wrestle for both, I have a decision whether I want to go represent Costa Rica or the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the next year we go back through another season, just like this one.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have more time to grow, and um, yeah, it'll be interesting because the guys that are in the room, they developed much more. A lot of them are young guys,
Mm-hmm.
so the room's there for me to grow even
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the ultimate goal is Paris 2024.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
how do you feel about it, in kind of where you are right now, and even as a, as a coach, you and I'm sure you kind of agree with me, we can all eat, our bowl of BS sometimes, but we can also sometimes have to put that down and say, do you know what, this means that much to me that I will sacrifice everything to reach that goal. And
Right.
it seems that you've done that, with giving it up for 11 years, fulfilling other people's dreams, which many of us do, right? We go off, and this is what I've always wanted to do in my life. And I gave it up for years when as a teenager, and now it's something that I reconnected with. And what does that kind of like look for you? Like, bring us into, into that mind, and, and into the journey.
Well, back when I was faced with that, it's not a dilemma. It's an ultimatum,
Mm-hmm.
right? You do
Mm-hmm.
this or you do that. You can't
Mm-hmm.
have best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, in retrospect, I didn't have the self assurance in my self belief in myself to do or stand up for what it is that I wanted to do. So falling back on pursuing somebody else's dream was an easier task. I would say it was the lesser of the two. And so whenever, for anybody who's going to be watching this, if you find yourself in that situation, just stop and think, like, is this what I really want to do? Is this what God put me on this earth to do? Is this going to allow me to access the best version of myself? And if it's not, then there's no reason for you to pursue somebody else's dreams. Pursue what you know is good for you,
Mm.
and what you know is going to be tough to achieve. What you know is going to be full of hardships and full of challenges. And you know, you're going to put all your cards in. You're going to be all in on the one thing that's your plan A, not your plan B.
Amen to that, man. Amen to that. And I'll be in Paris to watch her. It's an hour and a half away for us. So yeah, as soon as you let us know, man, we'll all be there. We'll all be there to
It'll definitely be somewhere, you know, Erica's always wanted to go to Paris. She's traveled most of the world
Mm,
because, you know, she was a military contractor's daughter. So, but Paris has been one of the places she hasn't been in, certain places in Italy
mhm,
that I've been to, and, you know, that I haven't been to that she's dreamed about going.
mhm.
So it's going to be we're going to be crossing off some bucket list items on that trip.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, but also with the I, I I don't feel like I answered your question entirely when you asked me about the breathing, the cold plunging.
Mhm,
Wim Hof was the one who I looked up initially, and
mhm,
I found him because I was on YouTube looking for, you know, supernatural human beings that were documented.
mhm,
I don't know why I was doing that, but I guess I was on break. It was around that same time,
mhm.
and Wim Hof was one of them. He was known as the Iceman,
Yeah.
and I was like, maybe this is what he went through initially and got into his breathing. But well, I didn't realize he did the breathing work aspect
Mm,
of it.
mm.
So I was able to connect those dots later down the road, um, and realize that he did it from developing a mind that's going to be promoting you in a positive way. It's like an antidepressant.
Yeah.
So it puts
Mm,
you in the present because I
yeah.
believe his wife committed suicide or was depressed or something, and
That's right. Yeah.
something that he was like, it's not going to happen to anybody else. I'm going to put
Mm,
out the word. It's my vision.
mm.
This is how I'm able to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
breathing does a lot. So just breathe in that moment too. Breathe,
Yeah.
stop and breathe.
Yeah. 100%. I think one of the, I try to kind of practice and play with the breath and always do different things. And I love my daughter. She's amazing. She loves to breathe, and we taught her to breathe as well. She's 4, and every now and then, if she sees mummy and daddy getting a bit stressed, she'll go, right, mummy, just take a breath. And then she'll tell us to take breaths. Come on, daddy, take a big breath. If she knows I'm going to tell her off, she'll say to me, right, daddy, take a big breath. So she knows. But how amazing is that? Because,
Yeah.
our children are our biggest teachers, and it's phenomenal that we get to teach them, but they teach us so much more. And, I found through the breathing, doing a cold plunge, because like you, man, it was just not an experience. I wanted to do it, but I went through, I was doing a lot of healing, and I went to do some plant medicine work. And the shaman who I was working with had worked with him previously, did another plant medicine, which literally sent me to our creator. I've never experienced anything like that in my life, and went, right, I want some more of this stuff. Like this stuff is incredible. So I started learning about, the breath, started, just mastering it, really kind of understanding what can this breath do, without the plant medicine. And I've had similar experiences with it as well, and it's been phenomenal. But one day I went to do another ceremony, and by this point he had built a sauna so we can do the hot and cold, and he had like 4 big massive wine barrels which he had brought in, and he turned them into cold plunges. And he's like, come
Wow.
on, you've got to, you've got to come and do this. You said you wanted to do it. And he knows me. I'm all in or I'm all out. So when I come in to do a ceremony with him, or I come and do some coaching, or someone programs for me, I'm all in or I'm all out. Like I don't tiptoe. I used to do things like that. And I'm like, now that's so he said to me, right, this is the plan for today. This is what we're going to be doing. And he said, right, so we're going to do a little bit of breathing. We'll do some hape, blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay, cool. And then we'll go into the cold plunge. We'll go and do the hot and cold. Then we'll come back in here. We'll serve
You're
the
like,
medicine
whoa.
and do some breathing. So I was like, I heard everything. And I was like, cool with everything. As soon as he went cold plunge and he said 10 minutes, I was like, nah, mate, no, not going to happen. But God has a plan.
Yeah.
God has a plan. God paired me up with a Polish man who's a friend as well. I love him. And he
That's
went,
awesome.
come on, I'll come with you. I went, oh, have you done this before? And he's like, oh, yeah, in Poland, we used to sing like -20. So for him, it was nothing. I went, what about you? I said, this is my first time. And I was like, I'll do it with you. And honestly, just, you're talking about having a partner there. It's
Yeah.
so powerful, isn't it? Even through fear, when you're worried, when you're scared, or you don't know what's going to happen. And my mind, for some reason, thought that something bad was going to happen, that I was going to get sick. But I knew through the healing process that that wasn't my fear. It was fear that was passed down to me, which I remembered in different ways. And now it manifested into this. So I went, all right, trust the process. Let's go. You're on this journey. And I jumped on this thing. And honestly, Peter, I was shaking. I was violently shaking. But I remember just thinking, breathe, slow the breath down, really slow it down. And then I started talking to my friend. Next thing you know, I was like, oh, we up? He's like, yeah, 10 minutes, let's go. So we jumped in the sauna, and I actually then jumped back in again, which was amazing. So we did the sauna one more time, and then I went off and, we did the plant medicine and went off on this incredible journey. So this is it is powerful, isn't it? Like when we allow ourselves to overcome the fear, which sort of brings me to this question is, what do you do, when you're faced with fear? You've got so many incredible goals, so many things that you will have to kind of overcome. What steps do you take? What routines? What's the thing what's your go-to? When fear just kicks in.
I go to that voice in my head. It's interesting. I don't really, there's not a definite fear that I experience often. Like I don't really experience worry. I'm very carefree. At least I like to think I am. Because I do get frustrated, pretty easily, or I would say I'm easily irritable by certain sounds that I don't have control of, right? But whenever it comes to fear, there's not a lot that I fear. So, and I guess to kind of tie it into what you're saying is maybe it's the fear of the outcome that I won't produce the way I need to, right? I go in with everything that I do now and for this next full year, gold medal effort. I found myself at the U.S. Open last year. There's a Masters level, which is 25 and up to 30, and I was in that age range, and so I wrestled, and I remember my first match. I get put on my back, and I'm about to get pinned, and I arch, and I remember in that moment, I started praying because I didn't want to get pinned, but I remember saying to God, Lord, I did not come all this way to get pinned my first match. And so I was just sitting there just talking to him in my mind. And next thing you know, like he's trying to hook my leg and I can't even see his leg. I'm sure you know this from experience from grappling and wrestling. Like you start seeing things, like you start feeling with your limbs. Like they almost have a mind of their own. It's like, oh, there's the leverage that I need. And I was able to hook his ankle and flip him. And then he got pinned and just kind of just Turk him. And I remember that moment. I stood up and I just thank you, Jesus. I was
Yeah.
just thank you. Like allowed me to slow down, not freak out.
Mm,
Um, but I do remember my mindset wasn't like that initially. It was always going in and just go in and perform like you've trained, you know, train to win, always train to win. And but as I've developed this year with the wrestling team, the new I guess and over the new year, right? Everybody comes out with a new year word. It's gonna be the word for the year.
mm,
Mine's execution, and it's really execute on every level, gold medal opportunity. This is the gold medal match. So
mhm,
whenever we do stadiums, we run stadiums back up, staircase after practice. Every single spurt is a gold medal spurt
mm,
because you'll have like 20 seconds where you'll either be behind or ahead by a point.
mm,
And those 20 seconds is a lot of time for them to score on you,
mm,
a lot of time for them to avoid being scored on. So for me, it's just overcoming the fear mentally first. It's like it's almost not even there. It's like, oh, this fear, it's just a distraction. I don't even see it as fear. It's just a distraction. It's just a blinking light, whatever. No need. It's like if I'm driving a car
mm,
and then, and I'm low on gas and the light comes on, it's like I still got 30 miles to go.
mm.
Right?
I'm
I'm
good.
gonna find a gas station.
Mm,
There's no rush. I don't need to pull off an exit right now.
mm,
So it's just being able to slow down the scenario, breathe,
mm,
just know that if you're operating in the right mindset, things tend to go your way.
mm.
So
Absolutely.
it was actually very, it's honestly, this happened this week. Thank you, Jesus. Um, I had an order come in. My wife and I, we started a juicing company,
Mhm,
and it's allowed me to manage my weight a whole lot more easily. But also, other people and other coaches are into it because they know they're getting the nutrition they need to
mhm,
recover and be mentally focused and everything. And we were short on apples, and so I go to the store and I have to get gas also, and um, I get distracted by my phone as I'm getting gas, and I leave the keys in the ignition, not on. I actually turn off the car, but
mm,
then I I close the door and I lock it, and I go in. I pay for gas, and I come back out. It's like, oh, great, I can't get into my car, and my other car is like not drivable at the moment, so my
mm.
wife can't come over. Get the spare, and I'm like 5 minutes away, or like not 10 minutes away, driving wise, and I'm like, she can't even. I might as well run home.
Mm,
And but there's this guy there, and I'm not too worried, but I'm on a
mm,
time crunch.
mm,
There's this guy there who's working on the gas machine, on the actual gas pump.
mhm,
And I was like, "Excuse me, sir, do you by chance have a hanger or anything that I can get my car locked with?" He's like, "Oh, you locked yourself out?" He's like, let me get you some stuff." And he put together like he took a hook off one of the little J hook straps and tied it onto this long pole, and he helped unhook it. And I was like, "Thank you, sir. Like, can I get you a beer or anything? Like, what's your favorite beer?" He's like, "No, no, don't worry about it." I mean, he spent like 20 minutes working on, helping me out. And it's starting to get cold outside, and I don't get bothered by the cold,
mm.
but it's starting to get cold outside.
Yeah,
Shorts. I'm in a short sleeve shirt. He's in like a pullover, 2 layers, and he's fine.
yeah.
I'm just like, oh man, hey, it's getting taken care of. That's all that matters. I'm just worried about gassing up the car. I'm not even
Mm.
cold right now. So, but yeah, I didn't experience fear at all. More for me there was like, okay, as soon as I get home, all I know is I have to I have to operate a little bit faster. So I have to
mm,
be very focused.
mm,
So I actually that inconvenience actually motivated me to produce
mm,
at a higher level.
mm.
So I guess you could probably just, I guess I want people to walk away as like, if you experience fear, don't just see it as a simple distraction or as a motivation
Mm,
to push it along.
mm.
And
It's
it
how you
doesn't need to be
interpret it.
handled right then and there. Not
Yeah.
not all fears need to be handled right then and there. So
Mm,
it's like the gas light that comes on while you're driving. You don't need
mm,
to take the next exit. You
mm.
know, get to where you need to go and then take care of business later.
Yeah. And that's so important, I think. And I love that because so many people are so much more reactive, than anything else. And especially in society as well, over the last couple of years, everything that's been happening, it seems that, and this is the reason why I asked around fear, because there's been so much fear that's been produced and so much trauma that has come out of this. And it's important for people to always hear a message, that staying focused, staying in the now, staying in a moment, observing the things that one of the things I always say is control what you cannot control, accept, and it's exactly what you said. The red light comes on. There's no gas stations right now, but I know I've got about 30 miles and I can keep going. So let's keep
Mhm.
going. Then we find a solution, and I've got one last question, which I'd love to ask before we wrap up. What did you learn, or what have you learned through all this time, through your toughest time? What did your toughest time in your life teach you?
I'm trying to think of my toughest time. I would say my toughest time was probably when I came back home from Okie State the first go around. Because I hit a major depression. It wasn't where a depression where I was, thinking about killing myself or anything on that front. Because
Mm,
that was something that I already dealt with
mhm,
as a youngster. And so that was something that I was never going to access ever again
mhm,
because I knew my self worth from that point. But there are different depressions where you want to do certain things and you just don't, the doors aren't opening for you.
mhm,
And so for me, I was very depressed. In fact, whenever I first started coping with drugs was when I came home. I think it was during, yeah, it was during winter break, and it was the first semester after the first semester, and I failed my Spanish class, where I made a D. I didn't pass it, and so my parents were upset, and my mother, adopted mother, said, "Is this what we adopted you for?" And I was like I was just like really triggered, I guess.
yeah.
Why would you say that? Is this why we adopted you for? It's like, well, what am I, a pony?
Mm, yeah.
By this racehorse that you've been developing the,
Yeah.
races and, you know? So that was that I remember after that one experience, that's when I first smoked marijuana, when I first coped with
Okay.
drugs.
Hmm.
And, it was my escape for a long time,
Hmm.
you know, smoking marijuana. But luckily now I'm over that. I don't need it. I
Hmm.
used to do it just whenever I would, recreationally go and wrestle. It
Hmm.
just allowed me to be loose,
Hmm.
allowed me to be, just to step away from the rest of the worries of the world.
Hmm.
So, but now, I don't know, I came out of it much stronger. And really, what allowed me to come out of it stronger was meeting Erica. It was
Hmm.
interesting because I was on this spiral, downward spiral.
Yeah.
And even when I went for my study abroad, I would do the best that I could just to avoid, but it would always find some way in. I didn't have
Hmm.
much. willpower
Mm-hmm.
against it.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol, drugs, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I first met Erica, we met in a dance room, ballroom dance. And what initially got me there was because, I was in Spain, people were dancing a lot of salsa and, all these Latin dances, and I didn't know a single, step
Right.
at all. And that's
You
how
just
you pick
had the good looks.
well, even then, I mean, if I couldn't dance or, um, you know, um, show them off, right?
Yeah.
Show themselves off, then it didn't really do anything. So when I came back from Spain, I was bolder because of my Spanish. It allowed me to access a different extrovertedness that I guess I forgot I had, and then
Mm-hmm.
this is probably what they saw in me when I was little too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, as I started to get to know her more and more, she was showing me things like I would go to these EDM festivals,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they promote it with plur. It's like peace, love, unity, respect.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's on drugs,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't share, if this kid is not sharing, that alcohol with this person, and that there's a tension there, right? If girls are being passed around the same groups, it was weird.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't that deep into it, but I was aware of what was going on, and I invited her to go to one of them, and then I kind of closed it off because then I realized no, I don't want her to experience that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I closed it off was because she told me like, well, is that how you want me to feel? You want me to be objectified by all these people? I'm gonna be there dressed, fully dressed. I'm not gonna go in pasties or bikinis or whatever, fishnets. But you'll find that people are gonna objectify regardless,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're gonna try and push drugs your way or my way. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Heck no, let's not go there.
Mm-hmm.
let's go to this random fountain in the city and just dance merengue or something.
Yeah.
So we would find fun things to do that we didn't even have to pay for it. It was just out there. You
Yeah.
know, it's like the essence of being carefree.
Mm.
We'd go in we went to this tree house reserve. Like these people built these tree houses and they held them up like Airbnbs and stuff. You can rent them out
Oh
for
wow.
days. And so we went and experienced that. It's hotter than hell down there in Austin. We did it over the summer, and that's when they were the cheapest. And I was like, yeah, we'll probably but yeah, I mean, as our relationship, developed and matured, I began to see more and more of what the world really was, especially in
Mm.
these environments. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to take any part in this.
Mm.
This is what was pulling me in. This is what I was coping with,
Mm.
and I didn't realize it was actually taking me deeper and deeper into a depression that I didn't want to keep going down.
Mm.
So, it's very strategic of God,
Yeah, man.
the way He puts women in our worlds.
Isn't it funny? Yeah, and it's so funny how you mentioned Erica there and what you were going through, because exactly the same thing happened with me and Lucy, my wife.
Okay.
So strange. Yeah. So I was towards the end of my addiction, 10 years, I was off and I was coming towards the end of it, but I was living to die. I'd had overdoses and didn't stop, tried to commit suicide, didn't stop. And it got to the point for me where I was like, F it, let's just go. I'm just going to keep going. I don't care. I've got nothing to live for, which was a complete lie that, that fear and ego tells itself, to justify continuing on this journey. And that's what I learned. And being a, cross addicting addict, I was messing around on a dating app. and yeah, we matched. And next thing you know, we met on a first date. She told me she was in a 12-step program, and she started talking to me all about it. And here we are. We're going to be actually 25th of March, it'll be 7 years since we've met, and we started a business together, and we've got 2 beautiful children, got this incredible home, and I get to do this, and meet incredible people like you. And I was that man that I was done. I was, and when I made that decision for me, which that was my toughest decision, the toughest point I've been through was, Lucy had to put a boundary in place, which is something you mentioned. You talked about boundaries, and she knew all about boundaries. I knew nothing about boundaries. I had barriers, so for me, emotionally, I was just, I was all over the place. But what she did teach me is that boundaries about having self-love, self-care, self-respect, putting you first. And when you do that, you have that ultimate respect for yourself. And I never felt rejected by her. If anything, it drew me to her even more. And
Right.
I knew I had to make 2 decisions: live, die. That was it. I'd finished eating that bowl of BS by this point, almost. And I made a decision and said, you know what, enough is enough. And, this year, with God's guidance and continuing to do this work, I'll be 7 years clean and sober, so where can people find you, man? How can they get inspired by you? How can they connect with you? How can they learn more and more about you?
Well, definitely you can find me on LinkedIn, Peter Lewis Hammer, Peak Performance Strategist, and then you can find me on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram. I like to post a lot of the wrestling updates, the Warhammer Juices, the company my wife and I started, and then some of the biohacks. I'll post those in as well with some links to those products. But that'll be under Pistol Pete Hammer. And Pistol Pete happens to be the mascot for OK State. And I've had that handle since I left OK State. That became a nickname of mine. But yeah, Pistol Pete Hammer.
Pistol Pete Hammer.
Here
we go, man. Listen, thank you so much for today. Just kind of taking us on this journey, connecting with you further, and let's do it again. There's so many other things I wanna kind of get into, and
this was the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I know that there's so much more, and but I think we should definitely do a part 2 and really go into some further stuff, because we'll for sure help some more people. So look, thank you so much, and we'll catch up very soon, guys. As always, thank you so much for listening, for being a part of this show. Support Pete and everything that he does, and feel free to reach out to him, connect with him, and learn more and more and more about what he does. And always remember, like, subscribe, put your comments down. And if you want us to kind of do this again and go into a topic a lot more, let us know. I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.